I speak Victoria Wieck about how Maverick Leaders cover the baseline and how you need to be Maverick, to be different, to be successful. Victoria came to the US in 1971 as a penniless child immigrant who later turned her passion for jewellery into a $500 million business. We discuss what it takes to be this successful and the necessity to elevate and innovate. We talk about how Maverick Leaders are pragmatic and how they overcome obstacles. This is a fascinating conversation about Victoria's journey, the successful person's Maverick mindset, learning from failure on the road to success, and how Maverick Leaders manage and reduce risk. Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke Maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Victoria Wieck. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, I'm here from San Diego, so it's pretty early out here, but so good to be with you today.
I am looking forward to our chat here, so thank you for waking up to have the conversation. Before we kick off, though, who are you, Victoria?
Well, that's a tough question, actually, starting from day one, because, I'm not actually used to talking about myself. So let me just give it a go. So I actually immigrated when I was in my young teens to America from a little country called South Korea. And even within South Korea, we lived in a very small seaside village where, we didn't really have obviously we didn't have the internet, but we also didn't have TV. The TV signals didn't come to that little remote village. So I grew up with, kind of in an idyllic setting in a way that was really a blessing. But when we left, the country, it was socially acceptable to prefer boys, young moms preferred boys because the boys carry on the family name and, all that other stuff. So since my parents had 4 girls, they did not believe that socially, that country was going to be really a great place for their 4 daughters to excel and become whoever they want to be. So they immigrated to America, where everything, we were told and we believed in America, all dreams come true, and that this was the promised land where, amazing things happen. So we came to America, and lo and behold, the very next day, my father found out that all his assets were frozen in both countries. So we ended up with $30, and that was the beginning of my story. And I'm going to just try to make it very short because I don't want it to be all about my story, but I do know that young people, people's decisions are shaped by those early years. Yeah. So life was pretty tough. My parents, for the first time, each had 2 jobs apiece, at least, sometimes 3, 4 jobs. And so I did what a typical immigrant life in America, when you come there with no money, which is I didn't have any friends or family, money, mentors, or anything. We just had to kind of survive that day and then live the next day. So I did what I was told to do, which was to, learn to speak English, go get hyper educated if you can, and then go get a secure job. And I tried all that. And I actually did excel in all that. I was a great student. I learned to speak English. I got accepted at UCLA, which was my dream school because, it was in the West Coast. I didn't want to move away too far. And And then I even excelled in corporate, like where every time I got a promotion, I felt like I was actually suffocating more because for a little bit more money, I was working like 20, 30% more and, came with a lot more stress. So at some point in the Los Angeles traffic, I had a 90-minute drive. And, as you know, like it's not like in England where we have subway systems in LA. So, I had to drive. And I realized I was doing the same thing to my children that my parents did to me, which was my parents left us, left me with the other four siblings to fend for ourselves because they needed to make a living when they first came to America. But I was actually doing it to my kids by choice because at that point, I had a choice to work less, live on less money. And so I did that. I actually left the corporate world to took a leap of faith and I started a small company. And my only requirement at that time was, I was willing to live on much less money. I had an MBA, I was pretty well educated by this point, but I was willing to live on like $3,000 a month, which even by, back then, those standards, it was pretty low. And so that I could spend more time with my family, I can be present because I still craved the connection with my parents that I used to have before we left. So I did that. And, I wanted to work about 20 hours a week and make $3,000 a month. And I had a, loose business plan, but that small company I started back then with the goal of making $3,000 a month ended up doing $500 million in my career.
Whoa, stop. Tell me more. That's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So, we'll get into how I got to the 500 million. Okay. That actually is really amazing. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about that part of my story is that for all of you female entrepreneurs listening, and this is a really critical point of my journey, is that, I refuse to work. I mean, the whole reason why I started the company and I was willing to make less money was to spend more time with my family. So I was very insistent on working less hours. As you know, a lot of entrepreneurs actually end up working more hours for less money in the end. Yeah. So I lived in Los Angeles most of that time, and I still do part of the time. So LA at 6 a.m. is like about midday in Europe. Mm-hmm. And so I would wake up at 5 and I would start calling 6 o'clock in the morning for all my European, contacts and I would take my kids to school at 8 o'clock, 7:45. And when I came back, I had, nice little breakfast and I would start my day about, 9 o'clock California time where I had a lot of clients in California. But, 6 to 8 a.m., I had the Europe clients as well as New York, which is where the jewelry business was, the fashion jewelry, that business is a really hotbed of that is in New York. So I did that. And then, I worked at California hours for all of the West Coast, in anything west of Dallas, was that time zone. And then so I would, actually pick up my kids about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I stayed with them and I did their soccer, tennis, all that stuff with them until about 8 p.m. my time. So 9 p.m. California time is about noon in Asia. So I actually built an international business because of that goal. And I still have those hours today. So in fact, we were talking about how it's 7 o'clock in the morning here. I usually, I wake up even to this day at 5 every day because I've done it so long. It's kind of, I like it. The 6 to 8 a.m. is such prime time, quiet time where it's fresh. I could be very productive. So that's my story, basically, when you ask me who am I. So you can ask me the second question.
Wow. Well, I'm loving it already and I'm fascinated and I'm thinking that you must be a maverick to do that because I define mavericks as willfully independent people. Would you describe yourself like that?
Yeah, when I listen to I subscribe to your podcast, and when I listen to your episodes, and when I looked at your bio and the magazine that you, publish, and checking out your LinkedIn, and I saw the title, the Maverick, and I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. So, you know, and now we're talking about me, which, not, I don't usually do that just because, until like COVID hit, I was still mostly surviving and mostly working hard to improve. You get to $500 million in sales, not by being stale, not by doing what everybody else does. You got to be the maverick. You have to do something different because, I couldn't ever compete with these giant companies like De Beers, Tiffany's, Harrods. Like I couldn't compete with them. So you have to do things different. You have to find your lane. And once you do that, you have to keep elevating and innovating. You can't, in every way, the customer experience as well as the product line itself. Otherwise, you die. So I like that, that your whole point is, the Maverick paradox.
Thank you very much. That means a lot coming from someone like you who's been so successful. Tell us, so it must, I'm assuming that it must have been difficult because I'm looking at probably US politics today. It might well have been different, but I'm thinking about how does an immigrant become so successful? And I'm just imagining that there must have been some things that you had to fight against to get to that point. And I'm just trying to think, what mindset did you have? What did you do to jump over those obstacles?
When I landed in America, that was in 1971. And this was right out, the decade of the civil rights movement, where America, at the time I was a little kid, I had no clue what was going on. In Korea, 99% of the people that live in Korea are Koreans who were born and raised there. So the one thing Korea did not have is racial tensions. We didn't even know what like races were. I mean, we just thought, we were all the same.
Yeah.
So the only obstacle we did have, and just for your audience to know that most immigrants coming in from Korea or like Japan, some of these established countries, they're not poor people because they can't actually get a visa out. And so they're usually pretty well-to-do people that came here. And so when we landed here, my father thought that this was where everything came true because he thought he didn't have to worry about money. He thought he didn't have to worry about anything except the gender issue. Mm-hmm. So we came here and this was after the civil rights movement here, where there's a lot of division and tension and economic collapse. There was the oil embargo. And then on top of that, we still had gender issues here. There was definitely a very thick glass ceiling, in America as well, which I was aware of for the first time because I was too young when we left to really think about careers. But here, this was women's movement was actually equal rights movement was just beginning. I was one of the first generations of women working in a managerial position outside the home. So all these things were going on. Plus, we had the anti-war movement there. So I was actually overwhelmed at that time. But really the issue at hand for us was how we're going to get food, how we're going to pay rent. So I tell people when they ask me, how did you survive? What was the mindset? I love to say to people, I had, all these things planned. I did not. I didn't. I just simply survived. When your choices are so bleak, and you don't have choices. I mean, it's really either move one step forward, or you basically stay stale and take a chance. And, you know that if you do nothing, you're going to eventually die a slow death. So I did the one thing that I could do at that time in the very first days of my life here, which was to learn to speak English. And even that, Jude, was so difficult because when you know no one, right? You have no friends, no family. My parents didn't speak English. There were no English as second language classes. They weren't kind to poor people, or people without means as a country. They just didn't have the social structure to give you a safety net. Mm-hmm. So I asked my dad, I want to speak English. And so he basically got himself a English to English dictionary at the bookstore. And it was probably, I don't know, a few dollars. And he would randomly circle words. He didn't understand them himself, but he would just randomly circle words from A through Z in one color. The next day he would do it in a different color. And we did this about 200 words a day. And when you look up, if you were to learn to speak Korean, for example, and you pick up Korean to Korean, dictionary, you're going to find out that for every word you're looking up, there's like 10 words you don't know. So what I found out was that American teenagers, it's probably the same in England. They pretty much exist on 2,500 vocabulary words. And so, I kind of reached that point pretty quickly, and I was able to communicate with other people. But before I learned to even get to that point, I had to kind of sketch out what I was trying to talk about. So kind of like how you would do Pictionary, I would try to communicate with my teachers that way, which later on actually helped me because I design jewelry for a living. And when you're communicating, you have two types of communications. One is just necessity, like, hey, I need a cup of water, would be a necessity thing. But if you wanted to say to someone, I really don't feel this is right, or, I would prefer this over that because, so when you're trying to have to explain like feelings in a drawing, even at that very young age, you get pretty good at that because if that's your only option. So later on in my jewelry collection, that actually all reflected. So I would say, looking back at those years, that all of the adversities that I had to face as a young kid and suddenly too, they were kind of like, they all came with a little gift wrapped inside, and you had to kind of figure out what is the gift. So now today, if I, see something that doesn't go right, or just yesterday, we ran into, I don't know, some crazy traffic, something that used to take me 4 hours drive. It was like 8 hours or something like that. So I just joked with my husband and said, hey, so where's the gift in this thing here? Because I think that every adversity, every unfortunate situation, you could look at it as I think, and I don't want to talk too much about the social issue here, just because everybody can differ on that. But I would say that instead of trying to fix those things, if people are, mean to you, like I remember when my father tried to rent an apartment. And this was in inner city Los Angeles. And, with his broken English, he would knock on the door, try to find an apartment, because where we were was just really dangerous. And I don't know how many times people told him, your daughters look so adorable. I would love to rent to you. And this is like an apartment manager. And she would say something like, but I'm not supposed to rent to Orientals. And those statements were completely legal at that time because the fair housing laws didn't come into play until like 1978. So, and his answer was like, well, what's an Oriental? Because, when we live in Asia, you don't think of yourself as, whatever. So, but I would just say that, and his response to, whenever I would ask him, like, what's wrong with those people? He would say, we're in someone else's country. We came here voluntarily. And, we have to play by those rules and pretty much like just focus on yourself. And so we did that. But, right now things are much different now. But in terms of, that was one obstacle. And the other obstacle was obviously not having money. So if you're trying to start a business or anything like that, funding is a huge issue. And the lack of funding does a lot of psychological damage too, because you have to be so sure about your decisions. And then you can't be so sure about your decisions because you don't have an experience or context. So when we talk about obstacles, I would say that I've probably had a variety of them, a large variety of them, and also different, degrees of it. So, we've had quite a bit. I would say that I'm pretty adept to kind of navigating challenges.
Yeah, I'm wondering, thanks for sharing that. I'm wondering whether Because one thing I've noticed with Maverick Leaders is that, as well as being transformational and inspirational, that they're very pragmatic. So I've noticed that when something happened, there are a number of people who like to just moan and complain about it. And I'm looking there thinking, well, it's not going to change, so let's just move on. Because,
right,
it's not like you don't feel annoyed, and you may need to vent for a little bit, but you're not going to go on and on about it, because it is what it is. It's time to move on.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I would say that what I do, and I don't know where I got this part, so early on in my life, and maybe I was just DNA coded from the beginning, at birth. But when somebody's really mean to you, and I've had, in business, as you know, I wouldn't say as you know, you probably have experienced similar situations like I have, which is when you're a successful woman or you are trying to achieve that success. I mean, during my career, I've had a lot of women also who were playing that compare and compete game. And, some of them actually were much more nasty than some of the men colleagues I've had.
Isn't that such a corporate thing? Isn't it? It's very typical. Maybe probably not so much now with the millennials and stuff being leaders,
millennials are not, but I mean, when
Gen X and boomers,
But I would say when we were, people my age were going through we were the very first people. And most of the men didn't even know how to deal with us. I mean, because they're looking at their wives, half the wives actually didn't go to work. And, they wanted to treat you equally, but they didn't even know what that word equal meant, just because, do I open the door, or, do I address her? I mean, it was just a lot of basic issues there. So, but, when I felt like somebody betrayed me, or somebody, would do anything and everything they could to trample over you and, get to the top. And I've had many times where I've given somebody my heart and soul. I've lifted them, I've helped them in, career decisions and giving them customers and all that, only to find out that they, went behind my back, for example. Mm-hmm. So, what I do is, and this is where the Maverick thinking is really interesting, because the normal course of, when you get betrayed, and when you are sort of like the recipient of an arrow, the natural human beings, 80% of the people out there go, you know what? Geez, that Jude woman, I've given her everything. I've given her my heart and soul, and I thought I could trust her and I could depend on her. And, every time everybody else like attacks her, I was there defending her. And then she does this. I'm like, God, you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to get her back. Good. I'm going to get her back. And this is never going to happen to me. This is like a typical response. I never did that. I thought to myself, and then, you might even go, does she think she's going to get away with that? Because I've got emails to show everybody. I've got documentation. I've got this and that. You know what? I think to myself, okay, I shouldn't have trusted this woman, but I did for some reason. I gave my heart and soul. I thought she needed my help. And, she came, I didn't have to, but I did it out of the goodness of my heart. It really hurts me that, after all this, she did this. So what was it? Like, how did I trust it? Obviously, right?
I was sitting there thinking the same thing. It's not your fault, as in you made it happen, but there would have been a red flag that you ignored.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. And then Jude, you find out that there were like 4 red flags.
Yeah. Then you think they're thinking you're an idiot. That's the bit that annoys me the most. I'm so stupid. How could I have trusted her knowing this stuff?
Right. So, you're like, well, when she told me about this other person, that should have been a red flag.
Red flag, yeah. When she did that was a red flag. So what I do is I think to myself at that point, okay, well, after I see the red flag 1 or 2, and I said to myself, okay, I shouldn't have trusted this woman, but I did. So the lessons I learned is that next time I see any flag that even look like that, I'm going to be a little bit more careful. But this time, though, when a situation, a lot of times situations like that happen to me, and I would say about half the people, because usually people who betray you,
Usually people who actually lie to people, they have their game down. They know how to manipulate people around them. They know how to put a wall around them. They know how to manipulate other people against you so that they look good, like it justifies theirs. So I say to myself, okay, well, I could show everybody, walk around and tell everyone, this is really not true. And I have emails to show it all. And I thought to myself, you know what? Why? The last thing I need is spend another moment on this pathetic person. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the things the lessons that I learned here, and I'm going to focus on moving myself forward. And it doesn't matter, because truth will always come to the top. It doesn't matter what anybody tells me, because, I always say time is my friend, because a person who is dishonest ends up manipulating another person who's got questionable morals. They don't really last that long. So what happens is, I focus on, and I kind of compare this to, when I go to England, a lot of people they don't drive, but in Los Angeles, we have to drive. Sometimes when I'm in trying to get to work, and, we're all sitting in traffic, and people, there are some people who flip a finger, they'll honk at you for, not moving fast enough. They go in and out of all these lanes. And I'm like, oh my God, whatever. But about a few miles down the road, I will pass that person, because I was the consistent one that just focused on my thing. So these people that are doing all this busy work, most of those people, have not achieved anywhere near the success I have, because they've just been very destructive to themselves and to everyone else. And I think that when the other thing about successful people is that when you achieve a little bit of success, you don't, rising tides lift all boats. So you are not actually rising the tide, because the tide is there rising by itself. So when you succeed, I look at my journey and people, like your first reaction, which is, oh my God, 9 figures. That's crazy. I like to think that there was a little bit of luck involved, making a series of some bad decisions that ended up helping me make better decisions at the end. So it's not like I always tell everybody, look, I am an average person. I'm not an Einstein. I didn't invent anything new. In fact, I suck at math and I suck at science. Okay, there's a lot of stuff I can't do. And I'm an imperfect person, and with a lot of vulnerabilities, but I never gave up. And, I was relentless, and I was always an honest, authentic person. And I think that was more than enough, so I don't think this was when they told me to write a how-to book or a memoir, and I'm like, look, guys, I'm not Oprah. I'm not, any of these people. I'm just when I look at my success compared to some of those people, it's so minute. So this is why when we talked earlier, I don't really love to talk about myself that much, but it is what it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. There were so many things I was thinking. One is that Maverick leader trait of learning from failure. And recognizing that failure is just a stepping stone to success. So if this didn't work out, what did I gain from this? What did I learn from this? Blah, blah, blah. Right, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Might make another one, but we won't make that same mistake. It's just a stepping stone. And I think sometimes people can get hung up by failing once. When you think probably successes that have no failures aren't sustainable, because they feel like they're more luck driven. Do you know what I mean? Rather than work through.
Yeah, and I think that I think the other thing that I think is really interesting too is I would say I don't actually look at anything as a failure. I look at as if you try something and you get up every day, you try something. Now, let's just separate the two things. Like when you get up every day and you take risks, there are certain risks that are really not risks because you've teed up, you teed it up so that you've got a 70% chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
For example, like I talk about this, I have a client that I helped, he was opening a restaurant, and everybody says like that has a very high failure rate.
Yeah.
So what this person did was, how do I make sure that I have a really consistent supply of, customers? How do I make sure that my menu is, before opening day? So this person went to all the local country clubs. Normally, country clubs, golf clubs, tennis clubs, they usually close one day a week for maintenance and all that. So he pretty much went to all the local country clubs and told them that their members are welcome to try this menu at a brand new restaurant that's opening, all that stuff. And then he gave them a coupon for opening night. So when you tee it up that way, so that, he's done this for 6 months. So he's gone to the country club, the Chamber of Commerce, all these places. So he got the menu, like the most popular stuff. Pretty much he got to test drive it for free. Plus he had a natural business on opening day. He knew who he, because he gave him a 30% off. Plus if they brought somebody, if they brought a friend or somebody over, he pretty much started. So when he opened this restaurant, it was almost risk-free. And then after that, of course, he had to sustain himself. But when you take risks that are very calculated and, thought out, the risk management is a lot less. So I think that, when we show up and do those kinds of things consistently and something doesn't work, then there are no failures. It was either a lesson or a success.
Oh, I like that. So either a lesson or a success. I'm writing that down because I think that's wonderful.
You could always replay it.
But I think that right there is how Maverick Leaders think. It's a lesson or it's a success. Because when I say failure, it's like I say it in the terms of it didn't work out, not with it loaded with emotional baggage. It's just, it didn't work out. It's a failure. But not that, oh my gosh, I've been so stupid or no emotional baggage to it. Yeah.
And I think, Jude, when people use words like failure, because, as you know, a lot of the millennial generation or the generation before that, just before that, they grew up with, a lot of them with parents who didn't really nurture their kids that, you could be successful, you're enough. So these people, and you're looking at social media. I mean, kids my daughter's age, they're looking at social media where, everybody looks perfect. They're looking at plastic surgery at age 14. So you feel like you're a failure if you're a size 4, So what happens is when you look at it that way, when you actually refuse to think that you're a failure or anything you do is a failure. So pretty much if something doesn't work, it's a inexpensive lesson, life lesson. You're never going to make those mistakes again, or you have an immediate success. So I think that it's less damaging. It makes it easier to actually try something, I think. But I mean, going back to the Maverick, I just want to get back to, because a lot of people, when you look at my journey and you go, okay, well, how did you go? How do you even open a business when you have no money? And how do you actually start you have to have inventory capital or something, right? So let me just explain to you what I did. And this is the Maverick. I think this one little thing that I'm going to share with you is going to be worth both of our time here, because the jewelry business, number one, is the most competitive business known to man, because I've traveled in my business. I literally have traveled all over the world, to Middle East, Europe, North and South America, you name it. So every place I traveled, there's always a Chinese restaurant and a jewelry store. So, it's a very competitive business. And so how do you, it's also known as a business that requires a lot of money. You need a safe, like a floor to ceiling safe. You need jewelry insurance, especially in the fine jewelry industry. And you need to gain trust from your people. How do you do all of that when you have no money and you're an immigrant here? So I didn't actually have money to even make a sample. So when you make samples, they're usually about $300 just for the mold. And then the price of the sample itself, like gold and silver, costs more. So I didn't want to, a typical person in the business would come in and they would, have a collection of, 24 to 50 styles to show somebody. You might show like 6 pair of earrings, maybe 24 rings and, whatever. Well, if you look at the numbers, even if it's, some of the models, depending on complexity of it, it could be about $1,000 per mold for somebody to actually make a mold from scratch. So if you look at those numbers, I mean, that's already going to be, $20,000 to $50,000 to do that. And you still haven't figured out if anything's going to sell or not, if you got a customer or not, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, today I have the money. I still wouldn't do it. What I did back then was I sketched them all out. And I had like a little lookbook, and I went down to the local department store. You have the Neiman Marcus and Saks. It's kind of like a two competing Harrods London kind of stores that's right in Hollywoodville. So I drove down there, which was, about 20 miles from where I lived. And I pretty much asked the department store manager if they had these sort of styles, would they be able to sell it? I asked them, like, I'm trying to start a business, I'm trying to, figure out if you could guide me and help me, because, I don't want to make all these samples. I don't really have money to do that. So the assistant manager said, most of our clients, Hollywood studios, movie stars, or stylists for, certain sets, they actually don't even want anything in the store. They want something that's fresh and different. That's going to be, that they want a preview of things. Mm-hmm. And so they asked, like, would you mind leaving your drawings here? Because they were beautiful. I think we can sell it. And in fact, I'll make a few calls and see, if they would come in and look at it. Well, those people actually pre-sold a bunch of stuff for me. But then I still knew that most of America isn't Hollywood. So I needed to figure out, that wasn't sustainable, because people like me, or, so I thought, who would actually need jewelry? Because nobody needs jewelry. So I thought, who actually thinks that she needs jewelry? Yeah. So there were a lot of these women that were beginning to go to work for the first time in their lives. And a lot of the women, dressed like men. They had little like tailored suits with, white shirts with a little bow tie. And you go to a workplace and all the women look like men and all the women look like each other. So, I designed a separate line that really, back then, and it's still true to this day, that it's better now. But if you're looking for jewelry, fine jewelry, you have nighttime jewelry, fancy diamonds that are status type things. This is a 2-carat diamond for whatever. And, I got it at Harrods, the snob factor. And then you have the daytime jewelry, which is fun and funky, but none of them look like they're timeless and elegant and sophisticated. So I actually tailored for women who really craved that femininity, that wanted to have that look of polish, elegance, and understated elegance that they could show at work. So I designed that line, and I went to department stores that were 40 miles outside of there, which is more like reflective of America. And I did the same thing. I figured, that other thing works. So I asked the department store, assistant managers. I love dealing with assistant managers because they have a little bit of time on their hands and they're trying to move out in the corporate world, and they're much more less guarded about sharing information with you. Mm-hmm. So those people sold a bunch of stuff for me. So by the time I actually made samples, it was almost risk-free. I got to test drive everything before that. So the Maverick thinking is that just because you don't have money, well, don't let it stop you. Money is just money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the idea, isn't it? It's the strategy. It's the working it out and thinking, it's the innovation. One of the things I talk about a lot in terms of Maverick leadership is, strategize, innovate, and execute, which is exactly what you've done, isn't it? You've worked out the strategy, and then you've had to innovate around it, and then you've executed it in a marvelous manner to get what you want.
Well, thank you. I love your accent. The way you say marvelous.
Thank you. But yeah, I think that's really, really good. And it made me think about risk management. It's not really risk. The Maverick leader doesn't think of risk management. They think about managing the risk, because
Yeah, I think when you use words like the Maverick paradox, somebody might misinterpret that as somebody who's so bold that they're willing to take those risks. I would argue that you really can take all the risks you want, but you're really not taking unnecessary. You're not taking the unnecessary risks. For example, I think when I went through my MBA schooling, by the way, I was told by my professors at USC, which is a top 20 school for MBA programs here, that I was not going to be very good at marketing. So he had asked me to change my major. He advised me to change my major. So I ended up with 2 degrees, one in finance, which is completely useless for me at this point. But the one in marketing actually was pretty good. But basically, when you go through an MBA program, I learned how to set goals the MBA way. You learn how to, the risk management thing, there's like a simulation programs that you can use. And I was very good at it. But when I started my own business with no money, let me tell you something. The risk management thing that they teach you in all these schools, it all goes out the window. You almost have to completely unlearn it. Because when you set your goal in a company, okay, you set your goal and you're working at Verizon or some company, and you don't meet your goal as a leader or as a follower of some leader, and in fact, let's say you just fail fantastically. Instead of increasing at 40%, you decrease your sales by 70% because it was a horrible strategy. What happens is you simply get fired, or maybe you'll get promoted or transferred, depending on what kind of excuse you might have. But if you're a small business owner and you had expended your expenditures based on a 30% increase, and you failed by 70%, you're most likely looking at bankruptcy. You don't have a do-over. So that risk management factor in terms of how you set your goals is huge. I didn't have an option to fail. I mean, I started my company with no money, but whatever money I had, whether that was $800 or, $8,000, it was everything I had. So it was a lifetime of savings. So you can't risk that. But that doesn't mean you don't try. That doesn't mean you stay at home and be stuck at a job. I think that there is, and I think this is what I love about the Maverick paradox, because, and I love the word paradox because it actually is where you are taking risks, but you're not. And you know what I mean? Like you can tee it up in such a way that all you got to do is really hit the ball.
You know what? It's like in my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, I talk about the risk that for the Maverick, the risk is fairly minimal because you've worked it through, but it appears to be really risky for other people because they've not followed the process. And I think also with Mavericks, it's the understanding that whatever they've worked it, so whatever happens is okay. So you're sitting there going to do something, and then you work out what could go wrong and whether you can survive the going wrong. And if you can't survive the going wrong, you go back to the drawing board and change something until you reach the point that's saying, yes, this is what could go wrong, but that's okay because I'll just do this. So I'm going to plan to do this, but so you might have been planning to get a big premises and you're thinking, if it goes wrong, I'm going to lose X, but that's okay because I have Y. It's a risk I can manage. That's what I'll do.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas other people will look at it and go, oh, I'll just risk it. It's a big risk because I might lose this setting.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that you need to cover your baseline. So you have when you have a strategy where no matter what happens, you actually have a baseline, a safety net of some sort, that it makes it easier to take those risks. Like in my business, for example, I know you guys have QVC over in UK. You got a bunch of shopping channels, but here the shopping channel business is very big. I mean, we've got, and that's I've done hundreds of millions of dollars on TV. And what happens is when I go up on, with an hour of shows, like usually I'll have 8 hours of my own day. And so what happens is like for your top today special value, that item has to do, the network I was on at that time, it has to, the item by itself, the one key item every day, and it doesn't matter what category it is, whoever has that category has to do a minimum of $1 million for the day for that item. And it only runs for about 100 minutes or so. So how do you take those risks every day then? It's never about price, really. I mean, it is a little bit when you're talking about key items, but what we do is every show I'll come in and my buyer, me, the planner, the show, producer, host, we all meet and we look at our best sellers from the last show, the show before. So basically we say to ourselves, okay, we got 16 items in an hour, and we tee it up in such a way that, I'll usually open up with, a brand positioning item like, hey, this is Victoria. And this whole collection is about, understated elegance, practical, durable, high quality pieces at affordable prices. And then, so that item actually, while we're talking about it, we'll show all of that. Okay. It's got all those details. And then we'll say, well, coming up later on in the hour, we have, this amazing piece. And it's usually something that's very expensive, like that looks like it's, $10,000 piece, but it's only like 400 or something. Mm-hmm. So what happens is every time I mention it, there'll be a few that sells. So, and that item we buy purposely very low quantity. So what happens is by the time, and each time, every 5 minutes or so, I'll come in and say, by the way, like that item that we just showed you that looks like, it's $10,000, but it's only 400. We're halfway sold out through that. And then we actually sell it out because we buy it very low. We actually sell it out and say, okay, that item is completely gone. But we have this item for $69. Well, all of a sudden that $69 item looks like it's a killer deal. Okay. So we say if those two key items that we bought like 10,000 pieces of, if those items sell within that hour, everything else out of the 16 items is just gravy. But does that mean we decide like they don't matter? No. The other 16 items are there to kind of set the position that the two items that we bought deep are good deals, but also we're looking at the future superstars in those items. Okay, they're very carefully chosen because we know, for example, 20% of our inventory will generate 80% of our sales. But those 20% rotates. I mean, you can only sell so many of it. So you're going to need a future superstar that's going to be the 20% that generates the 80%. Mm-hmm. So basically so what we're saying is that those hours, because we make sure that those two items sell, you're going to meet your goal, the actual whole hourly goal, if you hit those two items on the money. And so those are usually reorders that we've tested before. But the other items that are fluff items, we're going to have about 8 of them that don't sell at all. Okay. We're going to have some that's just going to be discounted at 50, 70%. We don't care because you know what? We needed to reach and say, if canary yellows are selling really well and we're looking for the new canary yellow diamond, we might want to try some pinks. We might want to try some earrings. We might want to try some blues. And it's possible that the colors are all selling well. Why not try the whole color scheme and see, if canary yellow is indeed the new future superstar? Or maybe, we get a bonus. Maybe the pink sells just as well. We don't know. But we're willing to take the risk where 8 of them can just die. Does that make sense, or did I confuse you?
No, I totally follow it. It makes, to me, it feels like it's really obvious. In terms of a strategy, it makes sense to do that. Right. And I think that it can be difficult to understand if you're so into the detail. Do you know what I mean? That you can forget that you're in the woods.
Yeah, and I think, I explained it in terms of how a TV show is done, but you'll be surprised how many digital marketing courses are sold that way, where you have the good, better, best option. You got your upsells, downsells. So when you're looking at, the upsells and downsells are just all bonus. If you hit the main thing in the bullseye. So once you get on this track of having at least one winner, growing your business, it's almost impossible to not grow it. You know what I mean? I always say I started my company and my dream was $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
Within the first 18 months, I did over $1 million. And then I think the next 2 years, it jumped to $4 million. And then once I hit the 10 million, the company grew almost completely involuntarily.
Yeah, exponentially probably.
Right. So I would say that, going back to making decisions, I think that risk, management factor is very, there is a way you can manage risk and manage it well.
You know what? I love that. I think this is probably a good place to stop, though, for today at least. Is there anything that you would like to add, or I should have asked you, I didn't ask you, and you think I'm a crazy person, so you need to say it?
You're not crazy. You're not crazy. You're adorable.
Oh, thank you. Is there anything that you want to add?
I would like to add that going back to how I originally started this conversation, which is, and I don't want to sound harsh because I'm not a harsh person, but I'm a very direct and transparent person. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid of yourself. Don't be afraid of what you're capable of, because, sometimes you overthink things. And, I just want you to know that my story, as inspirational as it sounds and as it could be, only actions will result in something. So if you're inspired by my story, if you're inspired, of all the things you could do, don't let this moment go by. Don't let today, tomorrow, this week go by without you taking some action. And that action could be just simply writing down a better strategy. It just could be maybe even committing to something that you were afraid of doing. Whatever it is, only actions. It could be a small action. I started my whole life here in America learn the language, with the dictionary. That's literally all I had. That was step one.
And that must have been very hard, not actually having people talking to you where it's easy to pick up from what they're saying. Wow, yeah. You've done it the hard way.
It is, but I think that, again, for all of you, most of you are going to, you're listening to this podcast are in a better situation than I was in. And the only other thing you might be wondering, well, if you started your business, 1989 or something, life was simpler, things are different. Yes, life was simpler in some ways, but they were much more complex in other ways. And as far as starting a business, it was a lot harder to start a business with no money then. Today, I had to buy a fax machine for $800. We didn't have, my first computer was $5,000. It was an IBM PS1. And I had to save up a year or two to get that.
No internet as well for people to find.
No internet. So today, not only most of the internet is free and you can actually run a business out of your mobile phone, but all of the things that I used to pay, or I actually had to work it myself. For example, your calendar, to email, fax, follow up, organization, all of Google, it's all free. You can literally run a business with no money. And you can reach, social media is free. You can literally reach millions of people anywhere in the world. The world is your oyster, and you're never too late to start, and you're never too poor to start. And that's my message. So stop with the excuses.
Stop with it. Gosh, that's so Maverick, isn't it? Just stop with the excuses.
And that's the harsh part. That's
but it's said with love, though. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you're being mean. You're just this is what you need to do. Stop with the excuses. Just move on. I love it.
Right. So if you guys want to follow up on this conversation, I have a lot of people that have done the same thing, which is they've taken their passion to $1 million business or more. You can, listen to my podcast as well. $1 Million Hobbies is my podcast. And then just check up I do a lot of free webinars, and as you can imagine now, because I'm a very simple person, I live below my means. I live quietly here. Right now, I am entering a new phase of my life, which is my legacy is to create an impact so that something like 1 million millionaires will be created as of my message, and most of that message will be free. So just come in, participate, and I'd love to connect with you.
Sounds great. Do you want to share any links to those?
Just come to victoriawieck.com. So it's Victoria, WIECK.com. And it has my whole world, my jewelry, my books. I've written 2 books. One's a science fiction, one's a how-to. And then I have an education section where I am just about ready to load up lots of free videos that it's all free download. And, just wanted people to be happy and start something, and hopefully come on your show and talk about, my dream life, Jude, is that, can you imagine if somebody contacted you one day and said, I listened to your podcast with this, woman out in San Diego, and that was so amazing. I started this, and now I just did $10 million in business. I mean, that would be my dream life. So, wouldn't that be wonderful for you too?
Yeah, definitely. It's all about doing things for the greater good. And, I work with people that want to do things bigger than themselves. So that would be right on my passion hit there. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So that's my last message. And then I think I did enough talking today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Victoria. That's fantastic. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Victoria as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. Are you interested in Maverick leadership but unsure how to apply it? We can help. Judith Germain has collaborated with David Chislett to produce a 12-part video series on Maverick leadership and how to apply it to your creative thinking skills. This will truly get you thinking and putting into action your ability to innovate and execute, truly changing your outcomes. Check out the show notes for the link or contact us on judith@maverickparadox.com for more information. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.